Good morning. Welcome back to Planet Doug Behind the Scenes for Saturday, July 15th. It's about 10:30 in the morning, and it's a special day and a special morning because this is my last day in Kuala Lumpur on this trip. Tomorrow morning, 11 a.m. or 11:10 a.m., hopefully I'll be on board a Air Asia flight back to Sumatra. So I'm flying from KL to a city called Padang. It's an airport just outside the city of Padang. It's on the west coast of Sumatra, about 2.5 hours away from where I need to be. So I'm in the middle of trying to arrange transportation from the airport to the city of Bukit Tinggi, because I've been staying in a small village outside of Bukit Tinggi, and that's where I need to go eventually. And it gets a little bit complicated, though. It's just sort of how these things work out, because there is a shuttle van that I guess it departs from downtown Padang and then picks up a bunch of people there who are going to Bukit Tinggi. And if there's anyone that needs to go from the airport to Bukit Tinggi, they'll leave Padang and make a small detour and swing by the airport, pick that person up, and then they head off from there to Bukit Tinggi. But of course, if there is no one at the airport that wants to go, they just don't bother. So it's not like there's a desk. I mean, the company is called AWR, and it's not like there's an AWR office or an AWR desk at the airport with a schedule. It just doesn't work that way. You kind of have to deal with them personally through WhatsApp, I guess. That's what I have. I have a WhatsApp number for this company. And again, it's not like I can ask them for their schedule. Like, when is a van leaving from the airport? Oh, and then I decide which one I want, and then I reserve a seat on that van. It doesn't really work that way because, as I said, if there's nobody at the airport, they just don't go there. So you end up in this weird situation where, as a customer, I ask them, I was like, oh, what is your schedule? And they say, well, when are you arriving? You know, it goes back and forth. But it's hard for me to tell them anything because my flight will, maybe it leaves at 11:10. Anyway, it arrives, my flight lands in Padang around 11 a.m., 11 or 11:10. And that's what they want to know. AWR says, well, when is your flight landing? And I said, well, it's landing at 11:10. But I don't know how long it's going to take me to get through customs, through immigration, to get my baggage. And I'm having SIM card issues. I don't think I can even get a SIM card at the Padang airport. It's not a regular tourist landing spot. So, and it's not a major international airport. So it's not like I can sail through the airport and just pick up a SIM card along the way. I already have an Indonesian SIM card from my last trip there, but as I talked about in my previous videos, I'm struggling to figure out how the system works in Indonesia. And every time I get a new SIM card on a new phone, the phone only lasts for 90 days, regardless of the duration of the SIM card. I mean, the SIM card could last for another year, as far as I know. It's got tons of validity on it. But then when I try to fire up my phone, it won't connect to Wi-Fi or to the internet at all through mobile access, because your phone has to be registered with customs. And then that customs registration for me, it only lasts 90 days. And then they put a block on the physical phone, and that's it. That phone can never, ever be used again in Indonesia. So when I first went there, I used this phone. I got a SIM card, and then after 90 days, I no longer had internet access, and they couldn't fix it for me. They said, well, basically that phone is done. You can never use it in Indonesia again. So I have a second phone that I use for video editing, and I got a brand new SIM card. I put it in that phone, and that was on my last trip. But it's been 90 days since I got that new SIM card. So that phone will now be blocked by customs because it also had to be registered with Indonesian customs. They're preventing people from importing phones duty-free, tax-free, and then selling them in the country. That's why you now have to register your phones with customs. So basically, yeah, I've got these two phones that I use for internet access, And as far as I know, they're both going to be blocked when I get to Indonesia. So I don't really know what's going to happen. I'm going to figure that out. But maybe in the airport, maybe there is a SIM card office there, and I can go there and try to get a SIM card and try to get one of these phones set up. I don't know. But I don't know how long all of this is going to take. So I don't know when to tell AWR to schedule the van. They ask me, when do you land? I tell them 11 a.m. But I don't know exactly when I'll be coming out of the airport. So we're in this weird, the last message I sent to them, they haven't replied yet. So I'm going to send them, as soon as I'm done here, reviewing the trivia of my life, Planet Doug's parade of trivia, I will get back online and then I'll send them a message again and see if we can connect. But it is one of these things that's pretty casual. If you can't get anything set up, well, you just land at the airport, and who knows, maybe there will be a van sitting there waiting. The trick is that a friend of mine is picking me up in Bukittinggi and driving me back to the village. So he needs to know, like, when are you arriving in Bukittinggi at the AWR office? And at this point, I can't tell him because I don't know what van I'm going to be able to get, or if I'll be able to get a van. For all I know, I'll end up spending the night in Padang and then making the trip the next morning. It's hard to get these things organized in advance. So yeah, we'll see how. That's what I'm in the middle of trying to arrange all of that right now. That's the thing, yeah, when a friend offers to pick you up, that's amazing. But then you have to have a time, when you're going to be there, and I haven't quite figured that out yet. So that's what I'm up to this morning. I'm pretty much ready to go. I don't think I have anything else to do. The flight is booked. I've changed money. Yeah, I just have to get to the airport tomorrow morning, and off I go. Yeah. So yeah, as far as I can tell, I've done everything in terms of the logistics that I can do. So everything is all set. Yesterday was an interesting day. I actually met up with someone new for lunch. Someone that watches some of my videos on YouTube reached out to me and said they're going to be in KL for a few days, and was wondering if I had free time, we can get together for lunch. He said that he's fine with me mentioning his name online. It's Justin is his name. He was born in Malaysia and then immigrated to Australia. So he now lives in Australia with a big extended family, lots of children, lots of grandchildren, and yeah, has a very good life in Australia. And yeah, so Justin reached out and we arranged to meet at a restaurant called Nyonya Colors. I guess it's a chain. I'd never eaten at this restaurant before, and I know a little bit about Nyonya food. I've been to, I don't know if I'm saying it right, because there's a Y in there, N-Y-O-N-Y-A, so it's a Nyonya or Nyonya, I don't know. But I've been to this type of restaurant before, but I've never been to Nyonya Colors. It's a little bit of a chain restaurant, I think, and Justin was located around the Pavilion Mall in Bukit Bintang. So he suggested we meet there for lunch. He kindly offered to treat me to lunch, so that was very kind of him. So yeah, I met him for lunch, and see if I remember what I had. I made some notes here. I believe my main course was mee rebus, so a big bowl of noodles, which is really, really good. And then he suggested that I try fruit rojak. It's kind of a fruit salad for, to go along with or as a kind of dessert. So we ordered that as well. And with my brain, I couldn't really remember if I'd had it before. And I'd been thinking about this because I recently posted a couple of food type videos from Penang, and people in the comments were suggesting that, oh, I should try fruit rojak. This was suggested a number of times. And I wasn't really sure what it was, but then when it showed up on my table, at this restaurant, and I tried a piece or two. It was like, oh, okay. I think I have a memory of having this before, but I can't remember exactly when or where. And before he ordered it, Justin cleared it with me. He said, like, are you okay with fish paste? Because I guess it's a fruit salad, but it has a strong flavoring and odor of fish paste. And he said other foreigners that he knows and that he suggested it to don't like it because they don't like the fish paste. And I'm thinking, well, I'm not a huge fan of fish. It's not one of my favorite things, but put fish paste in something, that's fine with me as far as I can tell. So he says, yeah, I'm fine with fish paste. And then when it came, you know, and I gave it a good smell, I couldn't smell fish paste. I couldn't really smell anything. So I was like, no fish paste. And when I tried the first few pieces, I had no sense of even the flavor of fish paste. So there was nothing about it that was fishy or fish paste. It really was like a sweet, I think it was sweet, sweetened fruit cocktail of some kind. And yeah, it was fine. It was good. I couldn't tell you all the different fruits that were in there. There were all kinds of things that I was eating. And yeah, it was a bit of a surprise. Like I said, I think I've had rojak before, and yet at the same time, I had no memory of it. So when I started eating it, the fact that it was really nothing but fruit, I was sort of expecting that there would be some sort of base, like a rice base or noodle base, something there with some fruity things mixed in. But it was all fruit. The whole thing was like a big bowl of fruit, different types of sliced fruit with, I guess, the fish paste sauce. And it was good. Yeah, it was very, very good. But it was not what I was expecting at all. I didn't really have expectations, but it did come as a bit of a surprise. So, yeah, I think of myself as occasionally being a person who can talk. Like if you give me the right audience, someone I'm sitting with over coffee, 5 hours later, I'm still sitting there and talking. So I think of myself as someone who can hold up his end of a conversation. But Justin, I met my match in Justin. He could also be a bit of a conversationalist too. So when we first got there, we're sitting at our table in the restaurant, and we had a menu in front of us. And I'd never met Justin before. He'd never met me before. But the second I sat down, you know, the two of us just start talking, and we're talking and talking and talking. And eventually a waiter comes over, and he was going to collect the menu. And I think he thought we were done our meal or something. Like we'd been there for so long just talking. He figured, well, these two guys, they must have finished their meal already, and he's sort of taking the menu, and I guess it was time for us to leave, right? And we're saying, no, we haven't even ordered yet. So it kind of goosed us. So, okay, we better focus here and take a look at the menu and decide what to order. So then we did order, and I had what I just mentioned, I think it was rebus, fruit rojak, and then after that, he ordered ice kacang for me, you know, big towering, like a bowl with a tower of ice and, you know, green noodles and peanuts, I think were in there. Yeah, peanuts were in there. That's where the kacang comes from. And he had chendol. So he ordered that, and he ordered, boy, I wish it was a shrimp, a deep fried doughy thing with prawns. Yeah, prawns, and it came in a bowl with a spicy, like red spicy sauce. And it was very like warmed up, so like fresh out of an oven, or they heated it up somehow, and had, you know, the spicy red sauce, and it was all kind of chopped up with a big skewer, and you take pieces of it with your skewer and, you know, douse it in the red sauce and eat that. And I had that with my ice kacang. And yeah, that was very, very good. And yeah, Justin and I we were there for, I don't know, 2.5 hours, something like that, just comparing notes about our lives and having a good meal. So that was probably the biggest event of my day yesterday. And I didn't really have anything else to do in terms of getting ready for my flight tomorrow. At least I don't think I did anything else yesterday. I was working on technology, I won't go on and on about this. I've talked about technology enough, but my GoPro Media Mod, the door broke. And yesterday, out of nowhere, I came up with this really weird idea of how I can fix it, a completely out of the box left field idea. And I thought, no, there's no way that could work. Not a chance. But I did it. And yeah, this little gizmo that I have set up over there, it's actually using parts of the Media Mod, because there was this very thin metal plate that is screwed in with 4 tiny screws. These screws are so small, they're practically microscopic. If one falls on the floor, you will never find it because it's like the size of a speck of dust. Yeah, it's almost impossible to see if you lose track of it. But there was a metal plate there, and I undid all 4 screws because I wanted to see what was underneath this metal plate. And there were, I think, 4 or 3 equally tiny springs in there. I have no clue how this whole mechanism works, but the whole thing just snapped in half, and I can't use it anymore. So I was kind of taking the whole thing apart, and I thought, you know, this metal plate, instead of putting it back the way it was, I can flip it around, and then it sticks out over the edge, and then if I bend it, I can use it as a hook, and then I can attach a thin rubber band to that hook and then hold the door in place. And I thought, nah, there's no way this is going to work. And so far, I've been relatively successful. This change led to another mounting problem, and I'm trying to figure out how to deal with that. It's like every mounting system creates a problem. Like if you add an adapter, it interferes with another adapter. It's like there's no way to ever get this to work properly. Mounting a GoPro is, for me, an incredible challenge, mainly because I keep changing it. What I want to do is go from, you know, a handheld mount to a tripod mount to a bicycle mount to a scooter mount, and be able to go click, 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 click to a chest mount, from one to the other, to the other, to the other. And the way these systems are put together, there's just no way to do it. You know, you'd think you could do it because there are so many products on the market, like magnetic mounting systems you can buy from Ulanzi, you know, and you just, you know, click, 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 click. You can move it from mount to mount to mount like that. Trust me, it does not work. Not the way not the way you think it does. Maybe if you have 2 mounting systems, you could go from one to the other. But if you have a 3rd one or a 4th one and a 5th one, you have to have a different mount, and then you get into this wilderness of adapters and things, and none of it ever works. None of it ever fits together properly. So yeah, I'm constantly struggling with that. But that was my big technology adventure for yesterday. No more to talk about where that is concerned. I guess the other technology thing, though, I made a little note about it. It's just, this stuff drives me crazy. I have so many problems with security in general, where in theory, in the modern world, there is so much concern about, you know, identity theft and, you know, protecting you from thieves and scanners and things, and yet more and more and more security features that get added to everything, in my mind, they end up hurting me more than helping me, because I just run into more and more and more of them, and it drives me insane. And just a few days ago, or a few weeks ago, this weird thing started to happen on Facebook Messenger. I suddenly, across all my devices, I started getting all these messages like how, if you want to access archived chats, you have to enter a PIN. And I'm like, archived? I've never archived anything. PIN? What PIN are you talking about? And I just kept ignoring this message, ignoring it and ignoring it and ignoring it everywhere. But eventually it kept coming back so many times that I was locked out of Facebook Messenger for my personal account and for the Planet Doug account. And I was in a situation, I had to do something about this. Facebook was not letting this thing go. As many times as I told them, like, no, I'm not archiving, and I don't need another security layer. How many security layers are you going to pile on top of this thing? But it turns out it wasn't asking me for a PIN that I already had. it was telling me that I had to create one. And eventually I got locked out of everything. And the only way I could get back in was by creating from my Facebook account a new PIN number to get into Facebook Messenger. And I was like, all right, leave me, this will get you to leave me alone. I'll create another PIN and I'll make a careful note about what this PIN number is so I don't forget it. And I went through the process and I did it. And now every time someone sends me a message on Facebook Messenger and I go to look at it and reply, it keeps asking me for this PIN again and again and again and again. I'm locked out all the time because I created this new PIN number. And it's like, I didn't want to. You guys forced me to do it, and now I have to enter it constantly. And I don't know what it's for. It says, we have your Facebook Messenger is blank, and then in order to retrieve all the messages which have been archived, I have to enter this PIN. And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't know what this is, but here I am, entering this PIN now over and over again, when a few days ago, this thing didn't exist, but now it does. Yeah, I never understand how any of these things work. Facebook now owns Instagram as well, and they created Threads. So it's like this vast world of messaging that's going to get all complicated and confusing. And I often get lost on Instagram because their messaging system, people will send me a direct message on Instagram to my Planet Doug account, but I never know they're there because I don't even, if I go into my Instagram account and you put me on a timer and says, okay, Doug, find your messages and give me 5 minutes, I still won't be able to find them. I can go to an Instagram post and I can see if anybody's left comments, but apparently there are direct messages that are somewhere else. And every time I go to find these things, I don't know where they are on Instagram. They're hidden, they're buried or something. But I do have this weird Facebook business thing. I don't even know what it is, where it came from, why I have it. But it's a messaging system that shows me messages from everywhere. So it shows me Messenger messages, Instagram messages, Facebook comments, emails. Well, it says Instagram, and then it says Instagram comments, and it says email, but I don't know where the emails are coming from. I have no Facebook email system that I'm aware of, and I don't know what the difference is between Instagram and Instagram comments. It's probably Instagram is the direct messages, but it isn't often that this happens, but people do send me messages, direct messages on Instagram, and I got one from some other YouTubers that I'd sort of communicated with online a little bit, Veggies on Tour. And they sent me a message on Instagram asking me a question about Malaysia, something I knew a little bit about. So they asked me. So, yesterday I did my typical Planet Doug thing. I wrote a long, detailed message with all the information I could think of, and then I sent that, and there it was. I could see it. It had been sent. And then I had some other thoughts, and I wrote another message with a lot of information, sent it, and I could see it was sent. But then a few hours later, I was looking at this system, and my replies to them were gone. I could see their question, like when I go to Instagram, through this Facebook thing, whatever it is, I could see their question, but my replies were not there. I'm like, well, where did they go? My first thought was, well, they were probably too long, and Instagram wouldn't accept such a long message, and it just never got sent, and Instagram just automatically deleted them. So now I'm thinking, oh, Veggies on Tour, they asked me a question, and now it looks like I never replied, and which is kind of rude. So I thought, well, I don't know what to do. I guess I'll reply again. So I took my original messages and I shortened them as much as I could, just to the essential information rather than my usual, blithering and blathering. And I just sent the essential short message. Boom. Oh, there it is there. And I added a second one, boom, there it is. 2 very short, clear, concise messages. Okay, now Veggies on Tour sees my reply. Ah, good. This morning I wake up, they're gone again. Not only are my replies gone, when I go to the Veggies on Tour Instagram thing on this system, their original question is gone. There's nothing there. It's just a blank page. So I don't know. Did Veggies on Tour delete my replies and delete their original question? Were my replies never sent? Is Veggies on Tour going to think for the rest of their life that Doug, never replied to our questions and what a rude fellow he is? I don't know. I don't know what happened. And, I've done my best, but the complexity of these Facebook systems has defeated me once again. Yeah. Facebook just confuses the heck out of me. It used to be very simple, but the system got so complex now, I don't know what's going on with it. Yeah, I really don't. And I have a couple of random YouTube travel vlog video thoughts. Nothing too terribly in-depth, but Itchy Boots posted another video. She's still in Sierra Leone. And in this video, she stayed within Sierra Leone. She didn't cross any kind of a border. So she's riding her motorbike, and her goal for the day was to get to some kind of a national park. And I found the video interesting, again, because it felt a little bit more logistics based than her other videos. And that's what I enjoy. I like to see the logistics of a journey, and the hardships of a journey in particular. And in this case, the hardships were real because she had to ride her motorbike down muddy, muddy jungle roads. And they're kind of into the rainy season now, so it's pretty seriously wet. And I recently, a month or two ago, I was watching all these videos on YouTube, which I enjoyed very much, all about truck drivers in Africa. I forget the name of the series, Dangerous Roads or something. They're documentaries showing the difficulties of overland travel through these, older dirt roads in Africa, and telling the stories of these truck drivers trying to get a load from A to B and trying to make it through the jungle on these dirt roads that are now muddy. And when they get stuck, they get stuck. I mean, I don't know how they ever get free, but it's a tremendously difficult journey. And I really enjoyed those videos. And then Itchy Boots, her video was basically that, but for a motorcycle. She never really got stuck that I could see. But the risk was there, and the roads were so slippery and muddy. Her rear tires, the rear of her motorcycle was probably sliding from side to side. And she passed a number of these trucks that were stuck, and they'd probably be stuck there for days, as they try and get them free. And the only way they'll ever get them free is if another, big, powerful vehicle comes along and is willing to hook up a cable or a chain or something and pull them out. But man, yeah, I found that interesting. That was a difficult ride for her, and more difficult for the trucks on that road. I saw there were so many of them that already were stuck. And just for Itchy Boots to get around the stuck trucks, I think was challenging. Had to get help, I think, a couple of times, because she had to get up near the back of this truck. There isn't a lot of room on the road, and she's got to kind of get around it, but then the rear wheel of her bike starts spinning, and then other people have to push from behind just to get her around, And then she ended up at this national park and did some hiking through the jungle to get to cottages, beautifully furnished, very comfortable looking cottages in the middle of this national park. And I guess her next video will be about exploring the park. She's probably going to go out on day hikes, with the people there. So again, my one thing about the video, I do wish, it's very awkward sitting here. Like I said before, I'm trying to get as much light as I can, so I have to sit this way, but it's not a very comfortable place to sit. But the one thing about this video, I wish there were more logistics, more information, because I'm you know, I'm in my mind, I watch one of these videos, I sort of want to live it vicariously and put myself in her position and think about, okay, what's involved in doing what she's doing? I don't just need to see the beautiful scenery. I'd like to see what's really going on. And I'm thinking, okay, how did she know about this park? Where did she get her information from? Why did she decide to go there? And then how could she be confident about going there? Like, did she call these people, send emails? Did she know there was accommodation there? Did she have any idea that when she got there, she could even go into the park? And what can she do in the park? And will there be food there, basically? And will there be water? Will there be a place to stay? You know, I think in her case, she has to know all these things because she's not set up for camping. She's on a hotel-only tour. As far as she might have an emergency shelter, she probably does, like a very small, lightweight thing. But she doesn't have camping gear. She doesn't have a stove. She doesn't have food. You know, she's not set up for camping. So she can't just zoom off into the jungle and see and just hope that there's food and water when she gets there. And she has, like, how much does it cost? You know, it doesn't look like this place would be cheap. You know, a beautiful kind of cottage like that in the middle of the jungle. You know, yeah. So I'm interested in all of that, but she never talked about any of that. And also, the cottage where she was staying was several kilometers in the jungle. So again, I'm thinking, what about her motorbike? What about all of her expensive gear? Because when she hiked into the cottage, she only had one, like a waterproof satchel on her back. And that's the only luggage she was carrying. So I'm thinking, okay, well, what's going on here? Like all your laptop, all your expensive computer gear, chargers and cords and batteries and you know, she's got a lot of high-tech, expensive gear with her. Where is all of that? Where is her motorcycle? How did she arrange to store it somewhere safely and keep it dry and all that kind of stuff? You know, I think about that stuff all the time. It's the number one thing I'm thinking about because I guess it's a little bit of, I can't think of the word. But I watch one of these videos from anyone in the world. They're doing something amazing. It's like, oh, wow, that looks so cool. You know, why aren't I doing that? You know, but then as soon as you stop and think about it, like, okay, if I did do that, okay, there's so many problems to overcome, so much work and logistics and planning and stuff. And then you suddenly realize why you're not doing that because of all that stuff. But in the videos, they just kind of gloss over everything and they just show you the amazing things they're doing, you know. But you have to remember that, yeah, it's not easy to do these things. And if I were in her situation, I don't think I would go to this national park because of all those unanswered questions, the difficulty of getting information. And of course, I'm not really a national parks guy. She keeps riding through all these cities and towns, and her goal is to get outside of them. And in my mind, I'm thinking, no, I want to stay there because of all the bustling activity. That's kind of what I would want to experience. I mean, it's okay to be out in the national park, but I guess it's not something that I really want to do. There's so much work that goes into it. I guess, assuming you have to get all this information. As I said, if I'm going there, I'm wondering, okay, where's the food coming from? Where's the water coming from? All this sort of stuff. But anyway, I enjoyed the video. I enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to the next ones. I'm going to follow her journey all the way through Africa. I'm finding her videos interesting. And the other video that I thought I'd mention, a friend of mine sent me a link to this video, and the YouTube channel is called Dirty Motorcycle Vagabond. So DMV, Dirty Motorcycle Vagabond. And I don't know anything about this guy yet. I haven't done a deep dive into his channel. I've watched one video, the one that my friend sent me the link to. And he's obviously a motorcycle traveler, a motorcycle vlogger like Itchy Boots. He's an American, and I guess he's on his way to Sturgis, which of course is the huge motorcycle festival. And he's on his way to Sturgis, thousands of kilometers away, and I guess he's working there. I don't know. I haven't, like I said, I haven't done a deep dive, but he has mentioned that he's on his way to Sturgis, and he decided to take a route through Canada, and he crossed the border from Maine into Quebec, the province of Quebec. It's the French-speaking province of Canada. And then he went through Quebec City, a city called Three Rivers, Trois-Rivières. He went through there, and then he's on his way into Ontario. And I really enjoyed the video. Yeah, it was one of the more pleasant videos for me to watch recently, just because he's such a laid-back guy. It's not like a typical, you know, travel vlogger in Southeast Asia that has like all this stuff going on, you know, the markets and the food and everything's amazing and wonderful. He's just got a very laid-back style, and he camps. So vagabond, you know, that's why he calls himself Dirty Vagabond. Dirty Vagabond, no, Dirty Motorcycle Vagabond. So when in the video he crossed the border into Quebec, and then he needed to find a place to camp. So he's fully outfitted with a tent, and I don't know if he has cooking gear with him and stuff like that. He's addicted to rotisserie chicken. So I guess he's been on the road for a couple of months already before he entered Quebec. And he got in the habit of buying rotisserie chickens. You know, he just got this big rotisserie chicken, throws it on the back of his motorcycle, and that keeps him fed for a day or two. You know, he sets up camp, climbs into his tent at night, and just grabs another big hunk of rotisserie chicken, you know, and that's his dinner. Probably wakes up in the morning and has the leftover rotisserie chicken. And then he'll stop at a coffee shop or something and get some, you know, food during the day, but at the end of the day, he buys another rotisserie chicken, you know, and I really like that. I can relate to that very much. And he said he's losing a lot of weight on this high-protein rotisserie chicken diet. And I guess maybe at the beginning of his trip, he was a little bit, you know, a little bit pudgy, and he's kind of happy that he's dropping all this weight with this, you know, pure meat diet that he's on. But, yeah, having a rotisserie chicken diet does make life easier when you're camping out, but it's still, that's just the tip of the iceberg. So, I mean, a typical YouTube vlogger these days, most of the ones that most people follow, I mean, they're making a good income from YouTube, good enough that they can afford not just hotels, but nice hotels. So it's kind of interesting to see the contrast. They would ride their motorcycle. I mean, Itchy Boots would drive her motorcycle into Quebec City, find a nice hotel where they'd have a secure area for her to park her motorcycle, and then just carry her bags into a beautiful room, and then show Quebec City from the point of view of all the cafes and the historical sites and the cultural areas, and then, you know, staying in a very nice hotel and eating at nice restaurants. And that's one experience you can have. But this guy, he's a little bit closer to my own experience. I mean, in the past, I've done cycling trips in Canada, you know, cycling all the way across Canada, driving across Canada, taking a bus across Canada, taking a train across Canada, across the country quite a few times. And on those trips, I couldn't afford to stay in hotels. I didn't have the budget for that, so I'm camping outside just like he is. So I got to watch what he was doing, and he's basically recreating everything that I did on my trips, where, you know, you've got a city, you want to visit Quebec City, but before you go into the city, on your way to it, you start scouting for a camping site. And Canada, of course, has a lot of land. And so that makes it a little bit easier. And then you see a kind of a bush area, forest, and then you see a dirt road, like an old logging road or a hunting trail or something going off into the trees. And you think, maybe. Then you turn your motorcycle, or in my case, my bicycle, down that dirt logging road, and you go in as deep as you can, looking for a nice secluded spot where you can put up your tent. And what I would do in the past is I would go into these areas, find a spot, like to scout it, and say, okay, here's where I can put my tent, and I'm hidden from the road, because technically you're not really supposed to be doing this. And if the police see you, especially now, When I was doing this, it was decades ago, but now there's so much more concern about security. Everybody's suspicious of everybody else all the time. And if the police see you camping out there in the bush, they're going to check up on you and they will probably tell you, nah, can't do it. You know, you got to pack up and go. You know, they're not going to allow you to do it. But if you can get far enough off the highway, far enough off the road, and find a place where you can hide, you know, then you can do it. But I would scout an area. Okay, this is where I'm going to put my tent. And then I would ride my bike into the town, spend the rest of the day there. And just as the sun is going down, you know, I stock up on water and food for the night. Then I ride my bike back out of town to the area which I had scouted in advance and put up my tent and settle in for the night. I don't know if he does that routinely. He seems to find a place and put up a shelter, like a tarp and a tent, put up a shelter and leave a bunch of stuff there, and then went into Quebec City and played tourist for the rest of the day. And then I guess at the end of the day, you know, he gets his rotisserie chicken or something. Though in Quebec City, he didn't do that. He said he was taking a break from rotisserie chicken because he wanted to sample, you know, all this amazing food in Quebec City. And he got a bunch of other stuff, a little bottle of maple syrup. You know, he went to Tim Hortons, of course, had a cup of coffee at Tim Hortons. And then at the end of the day, when the sun's going down, you know, then he rode back out to where he was going to camp, you know, and he spent the night there. And yeah, it's pretty rough living. You know, I don't care if you've got a rotisserie chicken, spending your night in your tent in the Canadian bush. That's rough living. And, you know, there's so many, there's so many things. I guess, why would you talk about it? You're not going to make a big deal out of it. But you're out there with no water, you know, you're not taking a shower. So you're getting dirty and you're getting stinky, you're getting smelly, and, you know, dirty is in his title. And of course, there are no bathroom facilities either. So, of course, you have to get skilled. You develop skills. You wouldn't think it, but it takes practice, and it takes a certain technique to develop to be able to use, you know, the great outdoors as your bathroom. You know, it's it's a challenge, and especially with the mosquitoes. Oh man, the mosquitoes and the black flies and the horse flies. You're out there in the woods, and you want to, you know, drop your pants around your ankles and take care of the call of nature with these mosquitoes just eating you alive. I mean, it's an experience, and until you work out a proper technique and figure out how you do this, it's a challenge, and it makes day-to-day living difficult. I've often talked about how once you start bike touring, if you're camping out a lot, or motorcycle touring, if you're camping out, you very quickly go into a hunter-gatherer lifestyle. Before this date, you think about a lot of things. You know, a modern human being has many, many things on their mind that they're thinking about. But in a very short time, once you're camping out, all you think about is water, food, and shelter. Your life is dominated by those three things, and that you spend all your time dealing with finding water, finding food, and finding shelter. You know, your life becomes very simple, very physical, very, very quickly. So I enjoyed watching that video from that point of view, kind of being reminded of that lifestyle, you know, and the difficulties of it. How, you know, you might hear a story of some guy who rode his bike around the world and camping out all the time to save money, and you think, what a romantic, amazing adventure, you know, I want to do that. Or you have fond memories of your own experiences doing that. But as soon as you dig into it, it's like, oh yeah, it's not quite as romantic as you might think. It's tough. And, you know, it's a physical, you know, it takes a physical effort to live that kind of life. But anyway, dirty motorcycle vagabond. I enjoyed that video, and I'll check back in with him, because when he went to Quebec City, it was kind of cool for me to just to be reminded of just how nice Quebec is as a whole. The province, and Quebec City, Montreal, they're very distinct from English-speaking Canada. As I was writing to my friend briefly, when you come from, say, Toronto, because I was living in Toronto for a while, and I spent a lot of weekends in Montreal, and then you drive your car from Toronto to Montreal, as soon as you cross that border from Ontario to Montreal, you just instantly feel the change, where Quebec has a much more European feeling. You feel like you've suddenly arrived in Europe, that you are in France. The grocery stores look different. People dress differently. Fashion sense is different. Of course, the language has changed. People are speaking French now. And there's a lot more history there because Quebec, being closer to the East Coast, was where a lot of the early history of Canada is located from the colonial days, maritime provinces and Quebec. But as soon as you go west of Quebec, suddenly you're leaving a lot of the colonial areas behind. The historical buildings get left behind, and now you're into the newer parts of Canada. And if you go to, of course, Alberta and Manitoba, Saskatchewan, you're not going to see the history of Canada there because those areas were all populated much later. And then you get the history back in the Maritimes and Quebec. But it's a beautiful city, really beautiful. Quebec City, really interesting. The famous hotel there, the Chateau Frontenac, is quite a sight. The historical districts of Quebec, the old forts there, again, dating from the colonial wars. Because again, Canada remained British and French, of course, France and Britain fighting colonial wars. And then when the U.S. declared independence, and there's wars between the British and the because the British were still in Ontario area, and of course, now the United States declared independence, and then they're fighting with the British, and so there's a lot of monuments to the wars that took place in colonial times, things like that. But yeah, it's a beautiful city, very cultural, and it kind of made me a little bit wistful for Canada in a way. It's like, oh yeah, that's my home. Tim Hortons. Love the coffee at Tim Hortons. I think it's really, really good. And there's like a casual, comfortable style and atmosphere at Tim Hortons. It is not pretentious at all. I mean, I love a good Starbucks coffee here in KL, but Tim Hortons has much more of a family feeling to it. It doesn't, like I said, it's not pretending to be more than it is. They serve you a inexpensive, hot, good cup of plain coffee, and then here are some tables you can sit at and hang out with other Canadians. It's a nice atmosphere at Tim Hortons. I like that. So yeah, that was my YouTube roundup for today. That's what I've been thinking about. There are a ton of other videos I've watched, or I've seen thumbnails for some of the vloggers that I'm watching, all the ones that are here in Malaysia, but I don't have anything to say about them at this moment. Well, exciting trip update. So exciting that I had to reward myself with a cup of coffee. The little things in life just make me so happy. I'm not a complicated man in any way, it's the small things. But yeah, I mentioned I'm in communication with this company called AWR about transportation from the airport to Bukittinggi. And I sent them a message. It was late in the day that I sent it, so I think it was after business hours. But I was really worried about the message because one thing I've learned in my life is that when you communicate with a company, they answer one question at a time. Only one, like one question per email or one question per message. So if you write to a company and you have 3 questions and you just put them all together in the same message, they will pick one of those questions and they'll answer it, and they'll ignore the other 2. That's just a truism. It's just what happens. But sometimes I'm like, So like when I wrote to AWR, I sort of had an essay. It wasn't a simple question because, as I said, I can't really ask them, what is your van schedule? Because I know there is no such thing as a van schedule. They only go to the airport when they have enough passengers to justify making the trip, and sometimes they have no passengers, so they're not going to go to the airport. And it's a day-by-day thing. If they get tons of people showing up, they have to put more vans on the schedule to handle more people. I mean, it isn't like a bus line where there's a schedule or a train system. So anyway, I asked them kind of a bunch of questions, I think. I'm trying to think, how did I write to them? Oh yeah. I mean, I've done this before, so I know the information they need. They have a set form that you kind of fill out. Has to have your name, the number of people traveling, the date, the time that your plane lands, and the address of the hotel where you want to go. So you have to give them all this information, and then they kind of put all this together, and then they come up with a system of the number of vans and a schedule to pick all these people up. It isn't the same thing every day, also because they pick people up at their homes. They'll go to all the hotels in Padang, pick up a bunch of people, and they'll also go to private homes if it's an important person and the house is on the way or something. So there isn't a fixed and fast schedule. And I also mentioned that I'm a relatively tall person, and I've taken this van before, and in the past they reserved the front seat for me, which I love, which has more legroom, and of course as a tourist I get to look out the front windshield and I get to chat with the driver. You know, I love being in the middle of things. So in my message I also asked them, you know, can you reserve the front seat for me? You know, if there's an extra fee for that, I'll pay it. But I'd rather be there than in the back where it can be pretty tight, you know, pretty crowded. But anyway, my message to them was a little bit of a novella. It's just what I do. And then I thought, okay, they're going to write back with they could write back with one curt, abrupt blah, you know, just like they'll give me one piece of information and not answer the other questions, and then I have to write back to them, and we got to go back and forth. That's normal. But to my amazement, I just got a message from them, and yeah, it's a novella from them as well, and they answered all my questions. They anticipated my needs. They told me everything I needed to know, and they basically told me that on that day they could have a van at this time and at this time, and they mentioned that, yeah, I have to go through immigration and I have to go through customs and I have to get my luggage, and we don't know how long that will take, so we'll play this by ear, but we have a van at this time. And you know, they asked me which flight, like the flight number, you know, what city are you coming from? You know, they're on the ball. Beautiful English, nicely organized, friendly. Not only did they give me all the information I needed, they anticipated other information I might need. Amazing. And that just makes me so happy. So yeah, we're good to go. But basically it looks like there's a van at 1:30. And I think that's perfect because my plane lands at 11:10, if the schedule is, you know, if it leaves and lands on time. And from 11:10 to 1:30, you know, 2.5 hours. Surely, even I can make it through the formalities in 2.5 hours. So I think everything's working out perfectly. So yeah, big thumbs up for AWR. In fact, this is not unusual for them. I've dealt with them when I was in Bukit Tinggi, and they replied in the same manner every time. Full sentences, all the information, very friendly, yeah, in English. They answer all of my questions. Yeah, love it. So very happy. And that's why I'm celebrating with a cup of coffee. Oh, Tim Hortons cup too. So just because I mentioned Tim Hortons earlier. As always, I have a ton of other things that I could talk about, that I want to talk about. Maybe I'll talk about, I'll do as quick as I can be, a pop culture update, because I really want to talk about some podcasts I've been listening to as well. I think they're really interesting, but I think that would end up being too long. One thing I'm thinking about, by the way, I did a little bit of an experiment recently where I recorded one of these journals, but I did it only with audio, so no video at all. And that has a lot of advantages for me. One, it's easier to set up, because setting up the camera and plugging in microphones and battery power and all this kind of stuff takes a long time just to get set up. Lighting, of course, my fancy lighting system, which involves turning on the light in my room, you know, that's my lighting system. But all that, it does take a lot of time, and it's kind of tiring because It feels like if I make the wrong move, I'm going to knock my camera over. It's not like a very stable situation. I've got a cord plugged into the USB power, into the GoPro. I could hit that cord. Anyway, it takes a lot of time and energy to set up a camera. And then the video files are huge. It takes a long time to copy those files. And then editing video and then exporting video, you end up with a file that's like 20, 30 gigabytes in size. It takes forever to upload. And if you do straight audio, for a while I didn't have this figured out, but I seem to have it figured out now, where if you do just audio, I mean, you can't upload audio to YouTube. It won't accept an audio file. It has to be a video file. But what I can do is edit all the audio, and at the very beginning of the file, I just insert a text box, and I put in the date of the text box. And then I have that on screen for like 30 seconds. And then the rest of the video track is, if you leave it completely empty, you don't put in any photos or anything, you don't stretch out the text box, then it processes lightning fast. And the file ends up being like 60 megabytes. And then it uploads instantaneously. So recording audio only can be very, very fast. Because I was going to say that this video journal might be my last one for a long time, because I just won't have the time in Sumatra to record a video journal and edit a video journal and upload it. It's a lot faster than a regular video, but it still takes a long time. But I'm thinking about, if I still want to do this and I just have a lot of thoughts in my head that I want to get out, then I can do an audio only, more of a podcast, though it's uploading as a video to YouTube. You know, I can continue to do something like this, but it would be audio only. So I'm thinking about doing that. I might experiment a little bit. So I might be doing that when I get to Sumatra. We'll see how it goes. I'm looking forward to being reunited with my Olympus camera, because it would be, I wish I had it here, because the GoPro is so much more difficult to work with inside. It's an action camera. It's meant for kayaking and parasailing and jet skiing and bike riding and motorcycle jumping. It's not meant to shoot video inside a hotel room. So having my Olympus is a lot better for that. So I'm looking forward to being reunited with my real camera. I hope it's doing okay way over there in Sumatra. I should have brought it with me. But yeah, that's what I'm thinking about doing. And I was going to talk about podcasts, but I said it's probably going to take too long. But maybe a little bit of a pop culture update, TV shows in particular. I talked about this show a while back, but someone asked me about it again. And it's probably the one show that I can recommend the most for someone who might share my interests in science fiction, in sort of Black Mirror style, thoughtful kinds of shows, post-apocalyptic environment. I enjoy stuff like that. And the show is called Silo. The first season is out, and the first season is already over, 10 episodes long, I think. So the 10th episode, maybe 8, maybe 10, I'm not sure, don't quote me on that. But the finale has already aired, and it's over, but it is quite worth watching. And I think a lot of the things that I admire in the show are a result of it coming from a book. It's based on a book series. So it isn't a story that someone just invented for television. It actually comes from a book. And in those situations, I find the storyline is much more thought out. So you're not going to get in the situation where all bunch of crazy things happen, and at the end it turns out there's no explanation, which happens so often in TV shows. It drives me crazy. But when you're dealing with a book, you know, the author knows where they're going. They have a story to tell. They know how it concludes, and all the crazy stuff going on in the beginning, all the mystery, there's a reason for that mystery. And you know it by the end of the book or the end of the book series, you're going to know. Everything will be explained. So I like that. And the show, I don't think it's following the books exactly. There's no way it can. It has to adapt them. But the heart of the story has carried over from the books. So it's all going to make sense eventually. So there were things in the show I thought could be improved. I thought establishing the scene at the beginning, like establishing the context. For me, it wasn't clear enough exactly what the situation is. And, thumbnail sketch, post-apocalyptic Earth, and there are 10,000 people living underground in a vertical city, which is essentially a silo, they call it. I think it has like 160 to 170 levels, and it goes down in a long, very large tube, and it's basically an underground city with farms, schools, hospitals, residential areas, court systems, security. They have police, they have everything that you would find in a normal society is in this silo. And the key thing that I found they didn't really explain well enough at the beginning, and I think it's important to understand, is that the people in the silo are completely oblivious to their history. They have no idea who they are. They don't know who built the silo. They don't know why they're there. They don't know what the outside world looks like. And pretty much all scientific and geographical and historical, biological, all that knowledge about the outside world has been lost, to the point that they do have a camera outside, one static camera that's aiming a little bit at the ground and a little bit at the sky. And these people are so cut off from knowledge that when they look at the video feed of the outside world at night, they don't even know what stars are. They're exactly like humans from, 50,000 years ago, looking up at the sky, and they see lights up there, but they don't know what they are. And it takes them millennia to even figure out that they're moving across the sky. And then, of course, it's not until quite recently that we even know that those are stars, other solar systems, and there's planets and moons out there. The people in the silo, all they see are lights, and they don't even know what they are. They don't know anything. And it's a little bit of a hard concept to grasp, the fact that they're so cut off from knowledge and history, and yet inside the silo, they do have medicine to an extent. They have a doctor, who knows stuff and knows about biology, and they have computer systems built into the silo. I mean, I think they have audio announcements, they have speakers, and they have electricity, they have a generator. So they do have knowledge of technology to that extent, but anything outside the silo, they just don't know. And there's some very interesting ideas in the show. And the show could be a little bit frustrating at the beginning to sink your teeth into it. The first few episodes, it's like, it doesn't quite engage you the way it could and the way it should. But if you stick with it, I find the story, in the end, is very satisfying. And I'm looking forward to season number 2. So that's Silo. Another show I watched all 3 seasons. I think there were 3. I don't really recommend it. So the fact that I'm talking about it doesn't mean I'm telling you it's a great show. It really isn't. But there was enough in it to keep me engaged, and there was enough in it in terms of the ideas to get my brain rolling. And this is a show it's an older one, a few years ago. And I never watched it before because I tried to watch the first couple episodes and it was like, oh, come on, give me a break. I just didn't buy it. The setup for the show is like, okay, no, I can't get into this. And it stars Jason Momoa. And he doesn't grab me. He's the star of the show. And he's portrayed as a very powerful fighter. He's got all muscle bound and he can beat up anybody, and he's a fighter and all that kind of stuff. And I kind of looked as like, nah, it's not for me. So I never watched it, but I was sort of craving a bit of what you might call science fiction, because this show called C is set in a distant future. Again, post-apocalyptic future. The human race has pretty much been wiped out. Cities have been destroyed. Everything is gone. And the few remaining humans are all blind. Basically everybody is blind. And they've been living that way, I believe, for centuries. So an entire society and a culture and civilizations, they have all these separate kingdoms, very small populations, but they're all separate kingdoms, and each kingdom has learned to live, to farm, to build homes, to build armies for security. You know, they basically have functioning societies, and they've done all of this completely blind. And that's the hook for the show. Like, what could a society of blind people, 100% blind people, how would that society develop? What kind of culture would they develop? How would they physically survive? And what do they know about the outside world? And for me, that's like catnip. That is such a fascinating science fiction idea to play around with. And apparently the show garnered a lot of praise for how much thought they put into it. Even like the societies, like modern societies of the blind, I guess, took an interest in the show, of course. And I guess there was a lot of praise for the accuracy with which they came up with the ideas of how a blind society would function, how, you know, day-to-day life, how would human relationships develop and things like that. And yet, occasionally, I saw a little bit of that, and yet there was so much in it that just left me scratching my head, you know? And I think they had trouble because the star was Jason Momoa. And of course, if you have a star like him, and if you're hiring Arnold Schwarzenegger or Jason Momoa or, you know, any of these muscle-bound dudes, you basically have to take advantage of that by making him a warrior, and you may have to make sure your show is exciting and there's lots of fighting in it. So of course they had to portray Jason Momoa as an amazing fighter, and that meant of course he had to fight a whole bunch of other people. So there's constant warfare in this show, groups of soldiers fighting each other, but they're all doing it completely blind. And then they start to push the bounds of what is realistic. So basically, in order to do this, they had to introduce this idea that they were all like Daredevil. You know, the character Daredevil, who is blind, but he's a superhero, and he can be a superhero and an incredibly powerful fighter because all his other senses have compensated. So his sense of hearing is so powerful that he, in fact, can see the world even better than we can with eyes. You know, his sense of hearing is so acute, he actually does see the world. He just sees it in a different way, right? And he actually sees it better than we do because his sense of hearing tells him things that our eyes can't tell us. So, you know, I'm here inside this room. All I can see with my eyes is what's inside this room. Daredevil can see everything in the whole building because he hears the sound coming from every room, and he can see everything basically. He can see people, he can see objects, he can see walls, doors, openings. So basically, when you think about a blind person and the struggles they might have, in Daredevil's case and in Jason Momoa's case, he doesn't have any of those challenges. In fact, he moves through the world more confidently than we do because his sense of hearing is so acute. And certain people in their society have developed their senses that they even have like almost superpowers of their own. Sense of smell so powerful that they can smell everything for, you know, miles in any direction. And anyway, it goes on and on and on. They want to have all these incredible fight scenes, you know, one community fighting another. And the only way you can do that, really, unless you want some people just, you know, they're blind and they're just sort of wandering around waving their swords in the air and they have no idea where the enemy is, you know, that would look ridiculous. But they've introduced this idea is that their sense of hearing is so powerful that, in fact, they can see everything anyway. And that starts to get a little bit, I mean, you're really interested in a blind society and how they introduce noise and sound in order to communicate. They have all these interesting ideas that they put in, and I find that kind of intriguing, but then they kind of drift away from that idea because they introduce all these superpowers now, and the fact that they're blind is irrelevant now because, you know, they can't see anything, but it doesn't matter. They're just like people who can see, but they see through their ears, if you follow my meaning. And then it gets a little bit more complicated when the whole story, basically, and I'm not giving anything away because I think this is in the trailer, it's the foundation for the whole show, is that you've got a blind society, everybody is blind, but then 2 children are born and they can see again. So 2 children are born into this society and they have the ability to see. And what does that do to the world? And in fact, in this world, they have a prejudice against sight, because they have this idea that in the past, sight was evil, and that's why the world was destroyed. Through the power of sight, we developed all this technology, nuclear weapons and et cetera, and that led to the destruction of the planet. So therefore, vision, the ability to see, has been turned into a kind of witchcraft. And anyone who can see, they kill them because they think they're witches. And now we have 2 children who are born who can see, and we follow their life. And the story of the show follows their progress. So I find that very interesting. And they introduce the idea that, well, okay, vision, the ability to see, offers some of these advantages in the physical world, but it also offers advantages in knowledge. Because books still exist. All the cities are destroyed, but they're still, you can go into apartment buildings and into libraries, and there are books everywhere. And all of the blind people have lost all of this knowledge. Books mean nothing to them. But suddenly these 2 children learned how to read, and then they suddenly, at the beginning, they're reading and they learn about modern technology. And I was thinking, oh, this is going to be so amazing. This is going to be so cool. How do they use their knowledge to develop the society? And in all the wars going on, how do they use their knowledge to make their side stronger? They're going to have all this technology that's going to be, defeating the other people, like a bow and arrow, for example. You've got entire societies where blind people, the only way they can fight is really to get, face to face and stab each other with a sword. Now you can see, well, you build a bow and arrow and you stand 100 yards away and then you just shoot everybody. It seems like it would be an incredible superpower. And the show sometimes shows that, but most of the time, they kind of touched on those ideas at the beginning. And then because they needed Jason Momoa to be busy being a super warrior, they kind of says, well, let's ignore that. Let's just put that to the side. And they just ignored it for many. They just went on for many episodes where the 2 children, they grew up into adults, they can see, but they made them into almost helpless children because they presented their ability to see as a handicap. So, they want to join the army and they want to fight, but every time they run into one of the warriors who is blind, the blind warrior just kicks their butt easily because they can hear so well. And then the guy in particular, well, the 2 of them actually fight a lot, the man and the woman. They're constantly having these fights with local fighters, and they get defeated all the time because their sense of hearing isn't as good as theirs. And the whole time I'm watching these fights, I'm thinking, well, it's pretty obvious why you're losing the fight, because you're fighting on their terms. There's the warrior with super hearing with his sword, and you try to attack him with your sword, he's going to defeat you. But you can see. So I'm thinking, if I'm fighting that guy, I'm getting nowhere near him. I'm going to stand 30 feet away, and I'm going to pick up a big rock, and I'm just going to hit him with rocks until he's dead. It's like, that's what I'm going to do. And he can run towards me if he wants with his sword, and I'm just going to skip out of the way. He can never find me. He can never track me down. I'm just going to stay 20 yards away from him and just keep throwing rocks at him. And then they develop bows and arrows, and I'm just going to shoot him. So anyway, they kept showing these children who could see as being completely helpless, like they were, like helpless creatures because their sense of hearing hadn't overcompensated, for the lack of sight. So I got a bit frustrated with that. It just didn't seem realistic to me, you know. And then towards the end of the series, they kind of went back to the beginning and they started to show the advantages of being able to see, particularly when it comes to weapon technology and developing new weapons and things. And I was like, okay. But anyway, I stuck with it. I watched 3 seasons of it, and it kept me engaged enough. An interesting world. Oh, interesting. I have a friend of mine in Taiwan. I communicate with him quite often about science fiction in particular. We share an interest in it. And I wrote to him about C. He says, oh, have you seen this show? And what did you think? And then he said he started watching it, but he found the overacting was, he couldn't do it, so he didn't finish it. And I knew exactly what he meant, and yet as the show went along, the overacting he was referring to was the one thing in the show that I loved, because there's one character, a queen. She's the queen of this society that we're following. She's a model, like a model actress from the Netherlands. The show is in English, and she speaks English, but she plays her character with incredibly odd, over-the-top mannerisms. And the way she speaks, there's this weird lilt in her voice, goes up and down and this way and that way. There's like this incredible range, weirdness to the way she speaks and the way she behaves. And she's absolutely savage as a queen. I mean, just, you know, powerful and cruel and whimsical, like any idea that pops into her head, no matter how savage or terrible it is, she just does it because she's the queen, you know, and she's all powerful and she has the soldiers to carry out her bidding, and she's giving all these speeches and her voice is just like all over the place. And I'm pretty sure that's the overacting that my friend was talking about. But I learned to love it. I was just captivated by her presence on screen. And every time the show was focusing on her, I just loved it. I really, really enjoyed it. And then when we moved over to some other characters to follow their story, I couldn't wait till we got back to the queen again. There was something about her presence. Yeah, I really enjoyed it all the way through to the end too, the end of the show. Yeah, I just loved her character. She reminded me of, there's the show Dredd. Like the original one, I think, was called Judge Dredd with Sylvester Stallone. Not that one, the new one called Dredd, which, interestingly enough, took place in a super tall skyscraper. So it's kind of similar to Silo, like a huge society living in this massive, like super tall skyscraper, like a silo, but it's above ground rather than underground. And Dredd is played by a different actor. Who plays him? I can't even remember. Is it Tom Hardy? Somebody. But anyway, I love that movie. I love Dredd. And the leader of the gangs inside the tower is played by Lena Headey. And she played Queen Cersei in Game of Thrones. That's how most people know her. But I knew Lena Headey from Dredd. And she plays the leader of one of the gangs, the most powerful gang inside this building. And I think her character's name is Mama. And she also had this incredible screen presence as Mama. And Mama reminded me of the Queen in the movie C, you know, her bizarre mannerisms and the way she behaved, you know, very, very interesting character. So anyway, that is the show C. I don't really recommend it, but it's worth checking out just to see this crazy, you know, overacting and the ideas around, you know, a blind society. How would it develop? So it's unusual. They tried to do something different, you know, and I give them credit for that. One more show, perhaps. I'll end with this one, and the only reason I'm ending with it is because I'm watching it right now, and I don't know. It's kind of weird. I was online and looking at various shows that were available, and I saw some season 2 episodes of something called Star Trek Strange New Worlds. And I thought, season 2 of Star Trek? I thought, okay, Star Trek Strange New Worlds, have I even seen season 1? I have a vague memory, and then I tracked it down, and I had seen at least part of episode 1 of season 1, so I had it in my head that I watched season 1. But then when I dug into it, I discovered, no, I watched a little bit of the first episode, and I don't think I liked it for many, many reasons, and then I just gave up on it. I thought in my head I had seen it, but it turns out I hadn't. So now I had season 2 already underway, and I thought, okay, well, let's give this a chance. And I went back and I watched all of season 1, and now I'm moving into the episodes of season 2. And again, I do not recommend it. If I had to give it an overall grade, I would give it a failing grade. As far as Star Trek goes, I am very much one of those guys. Original series, Star Trek New Generation, that's it. After that, nothing else exists in Star Trek for me. All the other shows are just so annoying to me. Some of them are just awful. I've watched some of the other ones, and I can hang in there just because I like science fiction, but I'm never happy with them. So for me, Star Trek Strange New Worlds has some elements of the original shows. For example, it's kind of episodic. So it's not like it's, Star Trek Discovery, I think, is like one story for the whole season, and I really did not like that at all. I like the old approach where each episode of Star Trek was one adventure. They meet a new alien race, and they tell that whole story in one episode. We're done. Next episode, we arrive at a new planet. That is one episode. So every episode is a self-contained story. That's what I like. And Strange New Worlds does that more or less. Not 100%, but they're basically being episodic. So I enjoy that aspect to it. But then things get really weird. I can see how they're trying hard, and I enjoy some of the predicaments that the crew gets into, like each standalone story, each science fiction story. I'm like the idea. I'm enjoying the idea and how they're exploring it. But the rest of it, what can I say about it? It's just too much of soap opera in the stars, their personal lives. It's like when they wrote the show, they came up with all the characters. Okay, we've got to have the captain, we've got to have the first officer, we've got to have the navigator, we've got to have the communication. They came up with all the characters, and then it's like they sat down and says, okay, every character has to have unresolved trauma in their life. And let's just write down, let's brainstorm how many traumas we can have, and let's just assign one to each character. It's just like willy-nilly. It's okay, we have to have a character who has a child who's really sick and is going to die. Of course, you have to have a sick child, and they're totally consumed with saving the life of their child. Okay, we need one of those. Him. Okay, he has a sick child. Okay, now we need to have someone who, their whole family was killed when they were young, and they witnessed their mother and father dying in some big disaster, and they have unresolved trauma about that. Okay, who's that? Okay, let's assign that trauma to this person. Every single character has to have something. And then they just go into this constant talking about their feelings and going to therapy and on and on and on. I'm like, come on, we're on a new world, there's a new alien race, there's stuff to figure out, there's technology to deal with, let's go do that. I don't care about any of that other stuff. And Spock, this is all, the captain is Captain Pike, who was like just before the first series of Star Trek. So this is a prequel to the entire series, but it's a very close prequel. So some of the characters, the communications officer, Lieutenant Uhura, who was also in the original Star Trek. Spock is there. So all these characters are already there. And so Spock is part of Strange New Worlds, and they focus on him a lot, which is fine with me. I love Spock in the original series, the whole, I'm logical, I'm half Vulcan, half human, but, you know, I have human emotions, but I really value logic. You know, they do that in the original series, and I can hang in there. It works for the most part. And then you get the fun banter between Captain Kirk and Spock. Like every episode, they tease Spock about his human side, you know, and his inability to understand emotions. Every episode ended with a joke, practically on the bridge, where Kirk and Scotty, the engineer, they tease Spock about something that happened in the episode about his emotions and his inability to understand humans. I love all that. But in this episode, for whatever reason, they're focusing on Spock's love life. Just episode after episode, he's just on and on and on. Spock's love life and getting engaged and engagement ceremonies and wedding ceremonies and the last episode I saw was one of the worst things I've ever witnessed, where it was a mother-in-law episode. It was a Freaky Friday, like body switching Freaky Friday, which has been done to death, combined with the annoying mother-in-law story, which is a staple of sitcoms. For whatever reason, they always have to introduce a mother-in-law who is horrible, like overbearing and annoying and opinionated, and like the mother-in-law episode. So we got an entire episode devoted to Spock dealing with his mother-in-law. I'm like, like what have you done to Spock? And everybody's trying to help him deal with his human emotional side. And the way they decided to help him was to give him a musical instrument to help him, you know, process emotions. So now we've got Spock's love life, and he's constantly in his quarters playing some kind of a weird lute. And I'm like, okay, no. Spock does not need to be in his room, you know, composing poetry on his lute or whatever that thing is and singing songs. That's not the Spock I know, you know. It's just awful. Because I remember Star Trek, The Next Generation. I said New Generation, right? Star Trek, The Next Generation, which I enjoyed Picard and all the adventures they got up to. But some of that show really bugged me. There was so much soap opera in the stars in that one as well. And they had so many concerts. Like you're on a starship rocketing through unknown parts of the galaxy, risking your life every single day and encountering alien races and on and on and on. And yet for some reason they have time to have endless concerts, just Picard and symphony orchestras on board the ship. There was the flute. Doesn't he play the flute? And I couldn't stand any of that stuff. It's like music does not belong in Star Trek. And now we've got Spock. The first thing they did was give him a musical instrument. And I'm like, oh no, please don't do this to Spock. So all of this is going on in the show, and it's just driving me crazy. Cannot tell you how little I care about Spock's love life, you know. But man, they're making a meal out of it in this series, Star Trek: Strange New Worlds. You know, man, I hope that story arc. I hope it's almost done. We don't need any more of it, but I think it's just going to go on for all of season 2. Yeah, it's not my thing. But anyway, that's Star Trek. It's a show I'm watching right now. Oh, one last thing. I mentioned before that Foundation is starting again. So the second season of Foundation just started. The very first episode just aired. So I have that to look forward to, you know, watching the second season of Foundation. I rewatched the entire first season to prepare for the second season. So I have the whole story fresh in my brain. And yeah. So that's what's going on in terms of pop culture at the moment. Lots more, but I'll end it there. Yeah, apparently I'm flying to Sumatra tomorrow, so I have to get organized, start packing, and yeah, I have a few more things to do. So next time you hear from me, I could be all the way in Indonesia. We'll see. and I'll see you then.